The first thing I learned about beauty was that mine was wrong. The world didn't whisper it. It shouted through laughter, through glances that lingered too long, through the cruel rhythm of children's songs that used my skin as a punchline. They said my color looked like midnight, like something to fear, like a mistake that sunlight had forgotten to fix. And yet, even as their words bruised me, I could feel something inside my darkness pulsing. Quiet, stubborn, alive. A light that refused to die, even when no one believed it existed. I was born in a small African village where color wasn't just skin. It was status. It was destiny. Girls with lighter faces were called gold, while those of us kissed deeply by the sun were called less. Beauty here wasn't about the shape of your smile or the kindness of your eyes. It was measured in shades, ranked like privilege, traded like currency. Every morning, I watched my classmates walk through the school gates laughing, their polished skin glowing beneath powder and pride, while I carried mine like a burden the world had placed on my shoulders before I even learned my name. They called me Midnight. It started as a joke, then became an identity I never chose. Even teachers smiled when they said it, as if mockery could be softened by politeness. I laughed too sometimes because it was easier than crying, and because every tear I shed seemed to prove them right. But when I was alone, the laughter echoed louder. I remember one evening standing in front of our cracked mirror, my face bathed in the weak light of a flickering candle, and I wondered if I could scrape the darkness off my skin. I mixed lemon juice with toothpaste, scrubbing until my arms burned. When the pain came, I told myself it was the price of being seen. My mother found me hours later, my hands trembling, my skin raw and red. She wiped the mixture away with tears in her eyes and whispered, "You are trying to erase a masterpiece." But I didn't feel like art. I felt like rejecting wearing a human form. Her words were soft, but the world's noise was louder. Every street, every classroom, every reflection told me that beauty was everything I wasn't. And yet, my mother carried her own darkness like silk. She wore bold colors, laughed from her chest, and never flinched when people stared. When she walked through the market, the world made space, not out of fear, but out of awe. I used to wonder how she did it, how she found pride in a color that others called ugly. She'd tell me, "Your skin is not a curse, my child. It's a story the sun wrote in permanent ink." I wanted to believe her. I wanted to wear that same strength. But when I looked in the mirror, all I saw was a girl, trapped between who she was and who the world demanded she become. One night, after another day of laughter and stares, I sat outside under the moonlight. The air smelled of dust and mango leaves, and the stars shimmered like they were mocking me. Tiny pieces of light floating in endless black. That was when it struck me. Even the sky needed darkness to shine. Maybe my skin wasn't a punishment. Maybe it was a reflection of something greater, something the world wasn't ready to see. So I made a vow, quiet but fierce, that if they couldn't see beauty in me now, one day they would pay to touch it. Not because I changed, but because I finally stopped apologizing for being made of night. I didn't know then that the same darkness they mocked would one day build an empire. I didn't know it would take me through pain sharp enough to strip away everything I thought I was, before it revealed who I truly am. Because before your light can rise, your shadow has to burn. The easiest way to stop the world from hurting you is to disappear. And that's exactly what I did. After years of hearing my skin compared to midnight and charcoal, I learned that silence could be armor. When people can't hear you, they forget to wound you. When they forget you exist, they stop noticing how broken you already are. So I began to fade, not all at once, but piece by piece, until the only thing left of me was a body moving through life without a voice. The girl who once sang to herself beneath the moonlight went quiet. I stopped answering questions in class, stopped meeting anyone's eyes. In group photos, I always ended up in the back row, not by choice, but because I ruined the balance. It was the unspoken rule of beauty, one I didn't need sight to understand. The lighter girls stood in front, glowing under the flash. I stood behind them, a shadow they never meant to capture. My father used to tell me I was brave, but even his comfort carried warnings. The world doesn't reward dark girls, my daughter. Be careful what you dream. He said it with love, but love built from fear still cuts deep. It taught me that dreaming too loud was dangerous, that ambition was only meant for girls who looked like hope, not like night. So I buried my dreams under politeness, under silence, under the safety of invisibility. Each morning, I dressed like someone trying to vanish. Dull clothes, quiet colors, eyes always low. The less they saw of me, the less they could hate. I used to count the seconds between their laughter, trying to guess which one belonged to me. I thought if I could predict the pain, it might hurt less. It never did. At home, my mother noticed my stillness. "You don't laugh anymore," she said softly. I wanted to tell her that laughter felt like sunlight, and I didn't think the sun would ever touch me again. But how do you explain to someone that the world has already decided who you're allowed to be? So I nodded and said I was fine. The most common lie the broken tell. Then, one afternoon, when I thought I had perfected the art of being invisible, someone saw me. His name was Mr. Leo, the new art teacher. He had paint on, his hands and eyes that looked like they'd seen too much beauty to believe in cruelty. During class, while everyone else painted sunsets and flowers, I sat staring at my blank page. He noticed. After everyone left, he walked over and asked, "Why didn't you paint anything?" I shrugged. "Because no one wants to see what I'd paint." He was silent for a moment, then said something I'd never forget. "You think disappearing will protect you, but hiding is just another kind of death. You're not supposed to fit in. You're supposed to redefine what fits." Those words hit harder than any insult I'd ever heard. They didn't heal me, not right away, but they cracked something open. For the first time in years, I felt seen, not as a joke, not as a shadow, but as someone who might still have light buried somewhere deep inside. That night I lay awake, replaying his words in my head. Redefine what fits. The idea sounded too big, too impossible, but also maybe a little true. I didn't know it yet, but those words would become the seed of everything I would one day build. Because sometimes it only takes one person to look at your silence and call it a beginning instead of an ending. But faith, I would learn, is fragile. Mr. Leo's words stayed with me, yet it would take years and one painful betrayal before I truly understood what he meant. The world wasn't done breaking me yet. It was only teaching me how to rise without asking permission. The first time I tried to change my skin, I thought I was saving myself. Instead, I was erasing myself. I didn't buy the cream out of vanity. I bought it out of exhaustion, out of the slow suffocation of never being enough in a world that worshipped the opposite of me. I wanted to stop feeling like a mistake every time the sun touched my face. I wanted to stop being the punchline to my own existence. It started one humid afternoon after school. I was sitting under the mango tree behind the canteen when my friend Amara leaned over and whispered like she was offering salvation. "There's a cream that can help," she said. "White and glow. It works fast. Just try it." Her skin was already a few shades lighter, her confidence newly painted. The other girls noticed her now. Boys smiled at her. I looked at her glowing arms and thought maybe this was the magic I'd been missing. That evening, I stood in front of the mirror, staring at my reflection under the flickering light bulb. The cream smelled like chemicals and flowers, sweet and poisonous at once. I rubbed it onto my skin, wincing as it stung. The burn didn't scare me. It felt familiar, almost comforting, like the burn of every cruel word I had already learned to survive. Pain, I told myself, was proof that it was working. Days passed, and so did layers of me. My skin began to peel like old wallpaper, revealing something raw and unfamiliar beneath. But the world finally began to look at me differently. "You look lighter," people said, and I smiled, even as my arms ached under my sleeves. Compliments replaced pity, and for the first time in years I was seen, but not for who I was, only for what I was becoming. The attention felt like sunlight after years of rain, but I didn't realize it was the kind that burns before it warms. My mother noticed before anyone else. One night, she came into my room and found the bottle hidden beneath my bed. The label had faded, its edges stained with lotion and guilt. She held it in her trembling hands and whispered, "What did they do to you?" Her voice wasn't angry. It was broken, full of pain that came from watching her child trade pride for poison. I couldn't look at her. "I'm just trying to be enough," I screamed. The words tore out of me like years of shame, finally exploding into air. She flinched, not because of my voice, but because of the truth in it. She sat on my bed, silent, her tears falling onto my hands that were no longer the same color as hers. That night, I couldn't sleep. The air smelled of medicine and regret. My skin pulsed where the cream had touched it. Every heartbeat felt like fire moving under the surface. I thought of my mother's words. "What did they do to you?" and realized she was wrong. They hadn't done this to me. I had. Because somewhere along the way, I started believing them. As dawn crept through the window, I went to the mirror again. My reflection stared back, pale, uneven, and bruised in places that shouldn't bruise. My eyes looked hollow, my lips cracked. The person staring back wasn't me anymore. She was someone I'd built out of fear and desperation. I touched my cheek and felt the sting of my own choices. My body had become a battlefield between who I was and who I was told to be. But the war wasn't over. That morning, as I washed my face, something inside me burned hotter than the cream itself. The mirror fogged, and I saw what the light had been hiding, dark spots spreading like bruises under my skin. I thought the cream had taken only my color. I was wrong. It had taken something far worse, something I could never get back. When the skin you're in turns against you, there's nowhere left to live. I woke to the sound of my own breathing, ragged, uneven, terrified, and the sharp sting of something spreading beneath my skin. The mirror didn't lie this time. It showed me the truth of my choices. My neck was blistered, patches of flesh rising like angry welts, each one screaming the same message. Beauty was never meant to hurt this much. The pain wasn't just on the surface, it was crawling inside me, slow and merciless. My skin cracked when I moved, bled when I bathed, and burned when I tried to sleep. The doctor's words were clinical, detached. Chemical damage, stage 2 pigmentation loss. But what I heard was something else entirely. This is what happens when you try to erase yourself. They called it beauty gone wrong, as if the pursuit of it had ever been right. The whispers came faster than healing. At school, rumors spread like fire through dry grass. She tried to bleach herself. She wanted to be white. She hates her own skin. Every word dug deeper than the blisters. The same mouths that once mocked my darkness now mocked my pain. The laughter was sharper this time, less about color, more about failure. It wasn't enough that I had suffered. They needed to make a story out of it. I stopped leaving home. The world outside became too bright, too cruel. Curtains stayed drawn, mirrors covered, the air thick with antiseptic and shame. My mother tried to coax me into the light, but I couldn't bear the thought of anyone seeing what I'd done to myself. Even her touch hurt, not because of the wounds, but because of her kindness. It reminded me of everything I'd betrayed in pursuit of belonging. Nights were the hardest. When the world was quiet, the memories grew loud. I would trace the lines of my scars and wonder where my beauty had gone, if it had ever existed at all. The smell of ointments mixed with the ghost of that bleaching cream, and I'd remember the first night I used it, how hope had tasted then, like poison disguised as promise. Days turned into weeks, and silence became my only friend. My reflection faded from memory. Even my own voice sounded foreign. I had become invisible again, but this time, not by choice. This time, the world had decided I was too damaged to be seen. Then one evening, as the sun slipped beneath the horizon and the house filled with shadows, my phone buzzed. A message from an old number. Mr. Leo. His voice came through the speaker, soft but steady. If they broke your skin, rebuild it stronger. Paint over what they cracked. Don't hide in the dark, child. It belongs to you. For a long moment I didn't move. I just sat there, letting his words echo through the quiet. No one had spoken to me like that since before the pain. Not with pity, but with belief. It was the first time in months that I felt something other than regret. It wasn't peace, not yet, but it was spark. That night I uncovered one mirror. My reflection startled me. The scars, the uneven tones, the traces of what had been lost. But for the first time, I didn't look away. Because behind the damage, there was still me. Bruised, burned, but breathing. Mr. Leo's message kept replaying in my head, long after the battery died. Rebuild it stronger. His words didn't heal my skin, but they lit something inside me, something fierce and defiant. I didn't know it yet, but that small spark was about to grow into a fire the world couldn't extinguish. And this time, I wouldn't let anyone, not even myself, dim the flame. Healing isn't about erasing scars, it's about learning to wear them like armor. My scars still ached, but they had stopped screaming. The silence they left behind wasn't empty anymore. It was filled with questions. What had I done to my skin? What had I really been trying to fix? And could something that was once broken ever glow again? I didn't want to hide anymore. I wanted to understand the body I had betrayed, to speak its language until it forgave me. So I started with research. Late into the night, when the house slept, I sat hunched over my old phone, scrolling through articles about melanin, cells, regeneration. I learned that my skin had been fighting for me all along. Every burn, every blister had been its way of surviving the poison I had fed it. That knowledge broke me and healed me at once. I realized I hadn't been cursed with dark skin. I had been blessed with strength the world had never taught me to recognize. The nights that once drowned me in shame became nights of discovery. I turned my pain into experiments. I raided my grandmother's old cabinet, jars filled with dried herbs, powders, and oils she used to swear by. Honey, turmeric, aloe vera, shea butter. The same things I used to roll my eyes at when she called them miracles from the earth. Now they felt sacred, like fragments of forgotten wisdom waiting for me to remember. I started mixing them, slowly, carefully. A drop of oil, a spoon of honey, a dash of turmeric. The kitchen became my quiet laboratory. The air smelled of warmth and earth, of something both old and new. My mother would stand by the stove, pretending not to watch, but I'd catch her smiling when she thought I couldn't see. "You're turning pain into purpose," she said once, her voice soft and proud. For weeks, I documented everything: how my skin reacted, how it felt, how it breathed. The wounds began to fade, not just because of the ingredients, but because of intention. For the first time, I wasn't trying to change my color. I was trying to love it. The mirror no longer frightened me. I'd trace the scars with my fingertips and whisper, "You're still here. You survived." What began as survival slowly turned into science, and science became something deeper: faith. I started noticing light again, the kind that didn't come from the outside, but from beneath the skin, where acceptance had begun to take root. I wrote everything down, every mixture, every mistake, every tiny miracle, not realizing I was writing the first chapter of something much bigger. One morning, while I was grinding shea and aloe into a smooth paste, my mother walked in. The sunlight caught the sheen on my arms, the same arms I had once tried to bleach into someone else's dream. She touched them gently and said, "This glow didn't come from a bottle. It came from the truth." Her words sank deep, not like a compliment, but like a prophecy. The girl who once begged to be lighter was now creating light from within. I didn't know it then, but the formula I was mixing in that tiny kitchen between broken jars, old memories, and my mother's laughter would one day light up billboards across the world. I had begun by trying to fix my skin. What I ended up doing was building the foundation of an empire, one born from scars and guided by truth. Sometimes revolution starts in a jar, not in a boardroom, not under stage lights, but in a small kitchen filled with the smell of shea butter and possibility. The same hands that once tried to erase their color were now creating something to celebrate it. I didn't set out to start a business. I was just trying to heal what the world had broken. But when healing becomes contagious, it has a way of rewriting destiny. I poured my first mixture into recycled baby food jars my mother had collected over the years. Their faded labels peeled at the corners, the lids dented and uneven. But to me, they were symbols of rebirth. Each jar held more than oil and herbs. It held my second chance. I tested the cream on myself first, then on my cousins who carried their own scars, burns, dark spots, reminders of the world's cruelty. Slowly, I began to see something miraculous. Not perfection, but progress. Their skin softened, their confidence returned, and their laughter sounded different, freer, brighter, full of the kind of hope I once thought was extinct. Word travels fast in an African village. Soon, whispers began to spread beyond our small home. "She's making something that heals," the women said at the market, their voices tinged with both curiosity and disbelief. At first, they came quietly. One woman, then 3, then 10, holding their coins in trembling hands, their eyes full of silent questions. I told them what I told myself every night. This isn't to change you. It's to remind you you've always been enough. I named it Ebony Essence. The name came to me in a dream, simple, powerful, unapologetic. Ebony because it was born from the very color the world had taught me to hate, and essence because it was more than skincare. It was identity in a jar. My mother helped me stir the blends, her hands steady and proud. Our kitchen became a laboratory of love and science, each batch a prayer whispered over the bubbling pots. We worked long nights, measuring, stirring, labeling by candlelight. The electricity went out often, but we didn't stop. The air was always thick with the fragrance of cocoa butter and determination. I handwrote labels on scraps of paper and glued them on with care. They weren't perfect, but they were mine. Every jar I sold was a small rebellion. Proof that the same skin the world mocked could now heal others. Before long, the village began to change. Women walked taller. Girls smiled at their reflections instead of hiding from them. Even the men noticed, not because the women looked different, but because they carried themselves differently. Something had shifted, something powerful. But success has a strange way of stirring the past. The same people who once laughed at me were now knocking on my door, asking for the glow. Their praise sounded sweet, but beneath it I heard the old tones of curiosity and envy. I tried not to let it bother me, but at night I'd still remember their voices from years ago. Midnight, too dark, too much. The memory of it would crawl into my dreams, reminding me that the world doesn't change easily. It only changes when you stop asking for permission. One afternoon, as the sun bled orange over the rooftops, a woman I didn't recognize came to the gate. She wore perfume that smelled expensive and clothes that didn't belong to this place. She smiled when she saw me, but her eyes, they weren't kind. "You're the one selling the cream?" she asked, voice sharp as glass. "I've heard so much about you." I nodded, my heart uneasy. She reached into her bag and pulled out one of my jars, one I hadn't sold to her. "Interesting," she said, tilting it in the light. "Let's see how real this glow is." Something in her tone made the air turn cold. Her visit wasn't about healing or beauty. It was about something else entirely. As she turned to leave, she smiled, but it wasn't friendly. I didn't know it then, but the woman at my gate wasn't a customer. She was a reminder that no matter how far you rise, the past will always come looking for proof that you deserve your light. It's funny how the same people who once laughed at you start whispering your name when the world begins to notice you. The girls who had mocked my skin now reposted my photos, tagging me in captions about self-love. They said they were proud of me, as if cruelty could turn into admiration overnight. I smiled when I saw their messages, but deep inside, I remembered every word they had ever thrown like stones. Because forgiveness doesn't erase memory. It only teaches you how to hold it without bleeding. Business was growing faster than I could keep up with. The orders came from towns I'd never been to, from women I didn't know. Ebony Essence was no longer just a cream. It had become a movement. Our small kitchen had transformed into something like a workshop, jars lined in rows, labels drying under the warmth of the evening sun. My mother hummed while she packed boxes, and sometimes, when the light hit her face just right, I'd see tears she tried to hide. "You did this," she'd say. "You turned pain into power." And yet, as my name spread, so did the ghosts. The first message came from an old classmate. "Hey, I saw your post. So proud of you. Could I get a free sample?" Then another, and another. They filled my inbox like echoes of a life I thought I had left behind. I replied politely, my tone calm, measured. But behind every word, I remembered standing at the back of the class, trying to disappear while they laughed about how my skin looked like burnt coal. I remembered how they used to whisper, "She'll never make it." Then one afternoon, as the sun dipped behind the market stalls, a familiar voice called my name. I turned, and there she was, Sarah, my loudest bully, the one who had started the Midnight nickname. Her beauty had once been her armor, her light skin, her pride. But the person standing before me was unrecognizable. Her skin was patchy, thin, bruised in places that should never bruise. She looked at me with the same fear I once carried, the kind that comes from realizing the world has taken too much. "Can your cream fix this?" she asked, holding out her trembling hands. "Please." For a moment I couldn't speak. 1,000 memories fought for my tongue, all the names, the laughter, the humiliation. Part of me wanted to say no. Part of me wanted her to feel the sting of rejection I had swallowed for years. But then I saw her eyes, desperate, hollow, familiar. Pain recognizes itself. I handed her a jar. "It's not a cream," I said quietly. "It's forgiveness." She started to cry. I didn't, because I had already cried enough for both of us. Watching her walk away, clutching that small jar like salvation, I realized something I never had before. Power isn't proving them wrong. It's choosing not to become them. Weeks later, Sarah's transformation stunned everyone. Her skin healed, her smile returned, and soon her story spread across social media. "From bleached to beautiful," one headline read. She credited Ebony Essence, tagging me in every post. Overnight, my business page flooded with messages, orders, interviews, offers. All because the same girl who once mocked me had become the face of my brand. At first, it felt poetic, the universe setting the record straight. But fame carries its own kind of venom. Cameras began showing up at my door, strangers dissecting my story, companies reaching out with contracts that smelled like opportunity, but tasted like control. The same laughter that once haunted me now echoed in headlines and hashtags. Sarah's face was everywhere, glowing, adored, profitable. But in the middle of all that noise, a small voice whispered a warning I tried to ignore. I thought the world had finally accepted me. I didn't realize it had only learned how to use me. The first time I went viral, it was for survival. The second time, it was for teaching others how to. Sarah's transformation was everywhere. Her photos, her story, her smile reborn from the ashes of regret. But it wasn't just her that people saw. It was me, reflected through her recovery, my name echoing beneath every caption. Created by the dark-skinned girl they once mocked. The internet, for the first time, wasn't laughing. It was listening. My phone didn't stop ringing. Notifications poured in like rain in a dry season. Orders, interviews, collaborations, disbelief. Strangers sent messages that began with, "You saved me." Women wrote from across the continent, saying they had stopped bleaching after hearing my story. My kitchen, once a quiet place of recovery, had become a production line of hope. Jars covered every surface, and my mother moved through the space like a proud guardian, wrapping each one with care as if it carried a piece of my past. Reporters came next. Voices from magazines and television shows asking me to speak about colorism, identity, healing, and African beauty standards. I sat in front of cameras, trembling at first, my scars hidden beneath long sleeves. But every time I spoke, the fear loosened its grip. I realized my voice didn't just belong to me anymore. It belonged to every girl who had ever been told she was too dark, too different, too much. Still, fame is a double-edged light. With every headline that celebrated me came whispers meant to wound. Competitors claimed my products were fake. Bloggers said I was lying about my past. "She's just another scam," one comment read. "She's selling stories, not skincare." I tried not to read them, but words have a way of finding the cracks in your armor. At night, I'd lie awake, scrolling through the chaos. Praise mixed with poison, admiration tangled with envy. For every woman who thanked me, there was someone trying to tear me down. I could feel old insecurities creeping in, whispering, "Maybe they're right. Maybe you don't belong here." But then, somewhere beneath that noise, I'd hear Mr. Leo's voice from years ago. "If they break your skin, rebuild it stronger." And so I did. I focused on my work, refining formulas, improving packaging, pouring every ounce of my heart into the business. My story had become my brand, and my brand had become my revolution. I wanted every girl who touched Ebony Essence to feel seen, powerful, whole. One morning, as dawn spilled gold across the sky, I opened my laptop to check orders, and froze. There was a new email sitting at the top of my inbox. The subject line read, "Global Investment Opportunity." The sender was a name I'd seen only in magazines, a multinational cosmetics group offering a partnership. They wanted to take Ebony Essence global to put my products on shelves in London, New York, Johannesburg. The letter spoke of growth, opportunity, legacy, everything I had once thought was impossible. My heart pounded as I read the final line. "We believe your story deserves the world." I closed the laptop slowly, my hands trembling. For the first time, success didn't feel like victory. It felt like a test. That email was more than an offer. It was a crossroad. Accepting it could make me a global icon, or a cautionary tale. I stared at the glowing screen, my reflection faint in the glass, and I wondered if the world that once tried to change me was now asking to own me. Every dream comes with a price tag, and sometimes it's your soul that pays first. When the email arrived, the world around me went silent. I stared at the glowing screen as if it were a mirror showing me everything I'd ever wanted: success, recognition, legacy. But the more I read, the more that light began to burn. The investor promised global expansion, mass production, millions in profit. They said Ebony Essence could be on every shelf, in every country, loved by every shade. It sounded like destiny, until I saw what it would cost. The first clause hit me like a slap. Formula becomes company property. I read it again, slower this time. My hands trembled. My breath turned shallow. The formula wasn't just a product. It was my story, my scars, my mother's faith, the fragments of my pain turned into healing. They weren't just buying a brand. They were buying the soul of everything I had built from the ashes. That night, I sat with my mother at our worn wooden table, the contract spread before us. She read it silently, her fingers tracing the printed lines as if trying to feel the truth beneath the ink. When she looked up, her eyes carried the wisdom of every woman who had ever been told to choose between dignity and survival. "They'll buy your pain," she said quietly, "and sell it back to you at a higher price." Her words settled into me like a warning carved in stone. I had seen it before, dark-skinned models turned into campaigns that didn't pay them, black-owned creations stripped of credit, voices used as slogans until they lost their sound. I didn't want to be another beautiful tragedy. For days, I couldn't sleep. The offer haunted me. All that money, all that reach, all that power. I imagined factories filled with my jars, stores in cities I'd never seen, women across the globe whispering my brand's name. It was intoxicating. But then, I'd hear my younger self, the girl sitting alone in the back of a classroom, the one who once tried to scrub away her own skin, whispering, "Is this what we fought for?" When I finally met the investors on a video call, they wore perfect smiles and expensive suits. One of them said, "You should be proud. We're going to make your story universal." But the word universal twisted in my gut. To them, universal meant diluted, a version of me they could control, repackage, and sell. Another voice chimed in. Of course, we'd make minor changes to the formula. Something more market-friendly. Market-friendly, as if healing needed permission. I looked straight into the camera, my heart racing. "You can't own something born from survival," I said. "You can mass-produce jars, but not the truth." Their smiles froze. One of them cleared his throat. "You'll regret this," he said softly, a threat disguised as advice. Maybe I would, but regret was a language I already knew, and I'd rather speak it in freedom than in debt. When I ended the call, my mother hugged me without a word. The world outside was quiet, but inside me, something powerful had settled. Peace. I had walked away from the biggest offer of my life, but for the first time, I didn't feel small. I felt whole. Everyone said I was foolish. Friends, journalists, even customers. They said no one turns down the world and wins. But months later, the same investors who dismissed me would come crawling back, not with contracts, but with headlines. And that's when I learned that integrity doesn't just protect your soul. Sometimes, it writes your destiny. What they tried to buy, I gave away for free. And that's what made me unstoppable. After I walked away from the global deal, people said I'd thrown my future away. But I didn't want to be a brand owned by strangers. I wanted to be a mirror for those who had forgotten their reflection. So instead of chasing investors, I chased stories. That's how the Black Glow movement was born. Not in a boardroom, but in a heart that had learned to turn rejection into revolution. It began with a single post. I uploaded a photo of my scars, the old ones, the faded ones, the ones that once made me hide, and wrote a caption that said, "You can't heal what you keep hating." It spread faster than any advertisement ever could. Women started replying with their own photos, their own words, their own unfiltered truths. From every corner of the continent, stories poured in, of girls who had once bleached their skin and were now learning to love it again, of mothers teaching their daughters to call their color gold instead of shame. The movement grew like fire across dry grass. Influencers joined first, then celebrities, And soon even the same magazines that once ignored me were running features about the dark-skinned revolution. Ebony Essence wasn't just a skincare line anymore. It had become a language, a declaration, a way for people to finally say, "I am enough." We didn't use polished ads or perfect models. We used truth. Real women with real stretch marks, freckles, scars, faces that told stories instead of hiding them. Our slogan was simple but powerful. Glow is not a color. It's a feeling. And people listened. The orders multiplied again, not because of influencers, but because the world was hungry for honesty. My small kitchen became a headquarters. My mother, still my quiet hero, managed the shipments while I traveled to speak at schools, workshops, and conferences. Everywhere I went, I saw eyes light up. Girls who had once scrubbed their skin raw, now walking proudly in shades they once cursed. There were days I'd stand before hundreds of women and still feel that 12-year-old inside me, the one who once begged the mirror to show her someone lighter. But now, instead of shame, I felt gratitude. Because that same girl had given birth to something much greater than her pain. The more the movement grew, the more it felt like coming full circle. The laughter that had once wounded me now echoed as applause. Even the streets that used to mock me now carried my billboards, my own face staring down from them, not as a model of perfection, but as proof that healing was possible. One night, after a long day of interviews and meetings, I returned to the new Ebony Essence flagship store, a sleek glass building built on the same land where I once sold jars out of my backpack. As I stepped out of the car, the crowd outside began to cheer. At first I smiled, assuming they were customers celebrating the launch. But then, as the lights flickered across their faces, recognition hit me like thunder. They weren't strangers. They were ghosts from my past. The classmates who had called me Midnight, the boys who had mocked my skin, the girls who had whispered that I'd never be beautiful. There they stood, waiting outside my store, their eyes filled not with mockery, but with something else entirely. Shame, wonder, and a strange, quiet admiration. My pulse quickened. The story I thought I'd outgrown was standing right in front of me. I didn't know whether to welcome them, or finally close the door for good. The same mouths that once called me ugly were now calling my name, begging for the glow they once mocked. The grand opening of Ebony Essence's first official store felt like stepping into a dream I'd built from my own ashes. The street was alive with music and laughter, golden banners fluttering in the wind, camera flashes bouncing off the glass like constellations forming around my name. But as the line stretched around the block, I realized that dreams, like mirrors, don't just reflect your light. They also show you everything you once tried to forget. From the stage, I could see them clearly. Familiar faces, aged by time but not forgotten by memory. Classmates, neighbors, teachers, even the boy who once told me I was too black for daylight. They were all there, holding their phones up, waiting for a glimpse of the woman who had once hidden behind closed curtains. Their cheers rose like a wave, but beneath the sound, I heard the faint echoes of laughter from years ago. Cruel, careless, unforgettable. The cameras turned toward me as I stepped forward, microphone in hand. My palms were slick with sweat, not from fear, but from the sheer weight of the moment. This wasn't just a business launch. It was a resurrection. The crowd quieted as I spoke, my voice trembling at first, then growing steadier with every word. I remember the days when my reflection frightened me, I said, my eyes scanning the faces that once made me doubt my worth. When I was told my skin was too dark to be loved, too rough to be beautiful. You said I would fade into the shadows. But look at me now. This same skin glows brighter than your flashlights. A ripple of laughter and applause spread through the audience. But I wasn't here for revenge. I was here for redemption. You once told me my color was a curse, I continued, my voice thick with emotion. Today, it's my crown. The crowd roared. the sound swelling like thunder against the storefront windows. For a moment, I closed my eyes and let the noise wash over me. It wasn't validation I felt. It was closure. I had spent years trying to prove my worth to people who never deserved to define it. Now they were lining up to buy it, bottled and branded, wrapped in the confidence they had once stripped from me. Reporters shouted questions. Fans held up signs that read, "Black Glow Forever." My mother stood beside me, radiant in her traditional dress, tears glistening as she whispered, "You did it, my child." I wanted to believe her, that this was the finish line, the end of the pain, the beginning of something pure. But even victories carry shadows. As the music swelled and I prepared to cut the ribbon, I caught a movement near the back of the crowd, someone standing perfectly still amid the chaos. My breath hitched. It wasn't a fan or a reporter. It was a figure I hadn't seen in years, someone whose presence rewound time in a single heartbeat. The crowd faded, the cheers dimmed, and all I could hear was my own pulse pounding in my ears. There, half hidden in the sea of faces, stood Mr. Leo. His eyes found mine across the distance. Older, softer, proud. The man who had once told me, "You're not supposed to fit in," was watching me redefine what belonging meant. My victory suddenly felt heavier, my joy mixed with something deeper, the kind of ache that only comes when the past and present collide. The people who once broke me were now my audience. But forgiveness was the only product I had left to sell. The noise of the crowd faded until all I could hear was the sound of my own breath and the trembling of my heart. I had thought this day would taste like victory, sharp, sweet, and final. But as my eyes searched the sea of faces, what I felt instead was peace. Because standing quietly at the back, half hidden beneath the golden lights, was the man who had taught me how to see myself, long before the world ever did, Mr. Leo. He looked older now, gray at the temples, his once booming voice replaced by a calm that spoke louder than applause. Our eyes met across the distance, and for a moment, time folded in on itself. I was no longer the founder of a beauty empire, no longer the woman in the billboard dress or the boss behind the glass doors. I was simply that dark-skinned girl in the back of a classroom again, the one who once believed she had no right to be seen, and he was still the teacher who refused to let me disappear. The crowd shifted as I stepped off the stage. Cameras flashed, microphones followed, but I ignored them. My feet carried me through the noise like a song I already knew the ending to. When I finally reached him, he smiled. That same patient, knowing smile that had once steadied my trembling hands as I tried to draw my first self-portrait. "You did it," he said softly. I shook my head. We did it. I reached into my bag and took out a jar of Ebony Essence, not the glossy one meant for display, but one from my earliest batch, with the imperfect label and the hand-tied string. Placing it in his palm, I whispered, "You rebuilt me before I even knew I was broken." His eyes glistened. He nodded once, slowly, the way teachers do when lessons have finally come full circle. "You were never broken," he said. "You were just waiting to shine where everyone could see." I smiled through tears. Around us, flashes exploded, voices shouted, the world kept spinning. But in that moment, everything stood still. I realized that success wasn't the applause outside. It was the quiet gratitude inside. Every insult, every scar, every night I cried, wishing my skin away. All of it had led me here, to this moment of peace between the past and the present. Later that night, when the store lights dimmed and the last customer left, I stood by the window watching the reflection of my sign glowing against the glass. Ebony Essence. The name no longer felt like a brand. It felt like a promise, to every girl who had ever been told she was too dark, too bold, too different. My mother's voice echoed softly in my memory. "Your color is power." She had been right all along. I had once lived for the world's approval. Now the world came to me, Not because I changed myself, but because I refused to. And that, I realized, was the truest kind of beauty. Not the glow on your skin, but the light that survives every storm. I was once the girl who scrubbed her darkness away. Now I sell it in bottles, not to change others, but to remind them that what they tried to hide was always gold. Because every scar I carry glows under the truth of who I've become. And somewhere out there, another girl stands before her mirror, whispering my story, learning finally that she was never too dark to shine. If this story touched your heart, don't let it end here. Share it. Someone out there still believes they're not enough, and your share might change that. Subscribe and stay with me, because every week I tell stories of pain turned into power. And remember, sometimes the world won't see your glow until you light it yourself.